On the night the sky lit up, his world fell apart. Mark never celebrated the 4th of July again, not since his only son died in an explosion he accidentally caused. He thought no one could ever understand that kind of guilt until a woman knocked on his door. She had a casserole in her hands and a reason to hate him. But instead of blame, she brought a thank you. What she revealed would change everything he believed about his son and about himself. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from? And don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Now get comfortable. This story will stay with you long after the fireworks fade. Mark Sullivan didn't decorate his porch. He hadn't in 5 years. No flags, no sparklers, no plastic red, white, and blue tablecloth like the neighbors had, just the quiet hum of the ceiling fan and the dull clink of ice cubes melting in a glass he'd forgotten to drink. Outside, the sounds of barbecues, laughter, and early firecrackers echoed up and down the block. Inside, only Duke's steady breathing broke the silence. The dog, a black Labrador mixed with graying fur around his snout, lay stretched across the rug, paws twitching in a dream. Mark watched him for a long moment. He'd adopted Duke the week after the funeral, not because he wanted a dog, but because the silence had become unbearable. And Duke, well, Duke didn't ask for much, just presence. And Mark could give that, if nothing else. On the kitchen counter, a framed photo leaned slightly to the left. Tyler, age 17, baseball cap backward, grinning with a sparkler in one hand and Duke, then just a pup in the other. Mark couldn't bring himself to move the photo, but he also couldn't bear to look at it directly. So he just let it stay there, catching his eye only by accident. Every 4th of July felt the same now, like a punishment disguised as a celebration. Mark poured more whiskey into the glass, even though the sun was barely down. He sat at the table, Duke raising his head to watch but not moving. The dog had learned there was no walk coming tonight. Not on this date. The last time there was, the firecrackers went off and Mark had collapsed on the sidewalk, breathless and shaking. And Duke, loyal as ever, had just curled beside him. "You're too good for me, oh boy," Mark muttered, stroking the dog's head. Duke sighed in response, almost in agreement. The clock read 6:44 p.m. Soon, the fireworks would start. Mark's phone buzzed once. He didn't check it. He already knew. His sister. Again. "Come spend the evening with us. Please. It's just burgers and bean salad. You can even bring Duke." She sent the same message every year. And every year, he ignored it. He didn't belong around families anymore. Not with what Tyler did. Not after the report confirmed what no father ever wants to read. Improper handling of explosive material. Failure to follow safety protocol. Accidental detonation caused by unauthorized fireworks assembly. The line lived in his head, etched deeper than any gravestone. Tyler had made a mistake. A stupid, irreversible one. And it had cost him his life, and nearly someone else's. Someone Mark had never met, never apologized to, never faced. He lived in that in-between space. Not a criminal, not a hero, just a man who raised a boy who died, trying to make something right. Too late. Duke stirred. A distant pop snapped in the air, someone nearby testing a bottle rocket too early. The dog whimpered, slinking under the table. Mark's jaw tightened. He hated this part. The anticipation. The build-up. The fireworks hadn't even started yet, and already the shaking had begun. His hand gripped the edge of the table. "It's just noise," he whispered, trying to convince himself. But his chest disagreed. Every crack of fireworks was a memory playing in reverse. Laughter, a flicker of light, a scream, then the call, the hospital, the report. Mark stood suddenly and paced the room. He didn't want to drink anymore. He didn't want to sit, but he didn't want to go outside either. He paused by the window. Across the street, a few kids ran with sparklers. One of them had a backpack and a cap, just like Tyler did that day. He backed away from the glass, heart pounding. Duke had followed him silently, pressing his body into Mark's leg. "I know, buddy." He crouched, pulling the dog close. "Almost done." Just get through tonight. And then 3 knocks. Sharp. Clean. Real. Mark froze. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days. Duke barked once, low and cautious. Mark moved to the door slowly, peering through the peephole. A woman, red hair, ponytail, early 40s, maybe, holding something in both hands. She looked nervous. He opened a door crack. "Hi," she said. "Sorry, I know it's weird, but I live across the street. I made too much food. I thought maybe you and your dog might want a plate." Mark stared at her. She held up the dish, covered in foil, steam still rising. "I don't mean to intrude," she added. "It's just, well, this night's hard for me too." Mark blinked. She had kind eyes, tired ones. Duke pushed his nose out the door, sniffing. The woman smiled and crouched. "Hey, big guy." Duke wagged just once. Mark hesitated. The smell was good. The gesture was simple. But something in her voice, that same tremble, that same weight he carried. "You got a name?" he asked finally. She stood up. "Angela." He opened the door a little wider. "Mark, this is Duke. We don't usually do company." Angela tilted her head. "Maybe just for tonight?" Mark looked at Duke, then back at her. "All right, just for tonight." Angela stepped carefully into the living room, her eyes scanning the sparsely decorated space. No photos on the walls, just one on the kitchen counter, barely visible under a stack of unopened mail. Duke trotted ahead of her, tail swaying gently, as if he decided she was all right. Mark closed the door behind her, suddenly aware of how quiet the house was. Too quiet. No music, no TV, just a low on the fridge and the occasional snap of a firework in the distance. Angela held out the dish. "I hope you like cornbread casserole. It was my mom's recipe. I didn't mean to make so much, but habits, I guess." He took the dish, nodding. "Smells good." She followed him to the kitchen. Mark set it down and reached for a pair of mismatched plates. "I, wasn't planning on entertaining tonight. Hope paper plates are all right." Angela smiled softly. "Perfect." They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. Duke lay between them, resting his chin on Angela's shoe. Mark scooped generous helpings onto both plates. Angela waited until he took a bite before lifting her fork. He chewed slowly, then gave a small nod. "Your mom knew what she was doing." Angela's face lit up just for a second. She'd be glad to hear that. Silence settled in again. But this time, it wasn't as heavy. Fireworks cracked in the distance, muffled by the walls. Mark flinched just slightly, and Angela noticed. "They're early this year," she said, as if offering a reason. He gave a short grunt. "Always are. Just a matter of time before some kid gets hurt." She studied him for a moment. "You've got that look, like someone who's seen a firework too close." Mark's jaw tightened. "You could say that." Angela didn't press. She took another bite, eyes drifting toward the photo on the counter. "Is that your son?" she asked gently. Mark hesitated. "Yeah, Tyler." A pause. She waited, letting him choose whether to continue. He was 17. Smart, funny, loud, always building things, always pushing limits. He stopped, his throat dry. He passed on the fourth. 5 years ago. Angela set her fork down. "I'm sorry." Mark nodded once, staring into his plate. "It was an accident. That's what they all said. But it doesn't feel like one when it's your kid who—" He didn't finish. Angela didn't ask him to. Instead, she said quietly, "I lost someone too, that same year." Mark looked up. "My daughter was nearly killed that night." His fork froze midair. "What?" Angela met his eyes. "She survived, but she was never the same. None of us were." Mark felt his breath catch. "I was working that night," she continued, "at the hospital. I didn't get to her until after she was brought in. They told me it was a fireworks incident. A boy had tried to get her out of the way after something went off course. The explosion hit both of them." Mark's blood ran cold. "I didn't know his name. Never saw him. Just a report. Vague details. She didn't remember much. Head trauma. Angela's gaze dropped to her hands. But I never forgot that there was someone there, that someone tried. Mark sat frozen. Angela's voice softened. Tonight, when I saw you with the dog and that photo over there, the boy, the cap, the way he smiled, I don't know. Something clicked. She looked back up at him. I think it was him. Mark gripped the edge of the table. My son, Tyler, he brought illegal fireworks to the party. He didn't mean to. He just wanted it to be special, impressive. He always wanted things to be bigger, brighter. He lit something he shouldn't have, caused a blast. Angela didn't flinch. He panicked, Mark said, but he ran. He tried to get people out. He tried to get someone, a girl. That's what they told me. He died shielding her. Angela was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, It was her? I'm sure of it. Mark looked down, shaking his head. You should hate me. You should have stayed away. Angela's voice didn't rise. I did for a long time. I hated everyone. The boy, the noise, the night itself. Another pop outside. Neither of them looked toward it. But then I realized I was still here. My daughter is still here. Because someone made a mistake and tried to make it right. Mark's throat burned. He shouldn't have been there with that stuff. He shouldn't have. He was a kid, she said, firm but kind, and he didn't run away. He ran toward her. Mark buried his face in his hands. You should hate me, not thank me. Angela reached for the glass of water in front of her, took a slow sip, then said, I think there's enough hate in this world. I came here tonight because I needed to say thank you, and because I thought maybe you needed to hear it. Mark said nothing, but something shifted in the room. The silence was different now. Not as sharp, not as empty. Duke stirred and bumped Angela's foot gently. She smiled down at him. Mark watched quietly. Then he stood and walked to the cabinet, pulling out a second glass. Whiskey okay? Angela nodded. More than okay. They clinked glasses over cornbread and firelight, the sound small and private. Outside, the fireworks were just beginning. But inside, something else had already started. They sat there, long after plates had been pushed aside. The cornbread casserole barely touched again. Outside, the fireworks had begun in full. But inside, time had softened, stretching between words and silences. Angela looked down into her whiskey glass, her fingers absently circling its rim. I used to love the 4th of July, she said quietly. The parades, the colors. My daughter would beg to stay up late to see the fireworks. She'd make me promise every year we'd get a better spot than last time. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. And then that year, everything just stopped. Mark nodded, but said nothing. Angela continued. She doesn't talk much about that night. Can't remember most of it, or maybe chooses not to. She doesn't like loud noises anymore. Won't go near parks on holidays. Doesn't even eat grilled food for some reason. Too many smells from that day, she says. Mark watched Duke shift slightly and rest his head on Angela's foot again. She reached down and stroked his fur gently. My family says she should just get over it, that it's been long enough. But time doesn't heal things like this. You just learn how to carry them. Mark's voice came low, raw. She still has you. Angela looked up. He looked away. I didn't get that chance. Silence again. Then, Mark said, Tyler was the kind of kid who'd light up a room before you knew it. Always had 10 ideas in his head. Most of them terrible, but passionate. He'd talk fast, trip over his own words trying to explain some new thing he wanted to build. He gave a soft, humorless chuckle. Once he tried to turn our lawnmower into a go-kart. I came home to find the engine half disassembled and the wheels replaced with skateboard trucks. When I asked him what he was thinking, he said, Dad, it's called innovation. Angela smiled. That sounds exactly like someone who'd try to make his own fireworks show. Mark looked at her. It was stupid, dangerous. I should have seen it coming. I should have been harder on him, stricter. Angela shook her head. He wasn't hurting anyone on purpose. But he did hurt people. And he also saved someone. Mark stood suddenly, as if the chair had burned him. He crossed a window and looked out into the night sky, lit by bursts of red and white. I don't know how to hold both of those things. That he caused it and that he tried to stop it. Angela didn't answer. She just let the weight of his words settle. I can't forgive him, Mark admitted. Not fully, and I hate myself for that. Angela joined him at the window, standing a step behind. You don't have to forgive him all at once, she said. Maybe you start with forgiving the part of him that ran toward danger, the part that didn't think of himself. Mark turned to face her. She continued, and maybe you forgive yourself for not being able to forgive the rest. Yet, he closed his eyes for a long moment. The sound of fireworks pulsed through the walls. Angela stepped away and wandered toward the shelf above the couch. There was barely anything there, just a dusty stack of books and one small wooden box. What's this? She asked. Mark turned. That was his project box. He used to keep all his ideas in there, notes, sketches, pieces of broken machines. I haven't opened it since the funeral. Angela lifted the lid carefully. Inside were scattered pages of notebook paper, a few circuit boards, a cracked compass, and a stack of Polaroids. Pictures of fireworks. She picked up one photo and turned it toward him. Did he take these? Mark nodded slowly. He wanted to design his own show someday. Said he could choreograph the music with the lights. I told him it was crazy. He chuckled bitterly. Guess he believed me. Angela placed the photo gently on the table and looked up at him. What if we did it for him next year? Mark blinked. What? Not fireworks. Not real ones. But something. A tribute. Lights. Music. Something safer. Something creative. In his style. Just to remember him for who he was. Mark stared at her. I don't know, he said. I'm not good at things like that. Ceremonies. Gestures. Angela gave a small smile. Maybe we don't do it for the world. Maybe we just do it for us. Mark turned away, overwhelmed. Angela placed the photo back in the box and closed the lid. There was a long pause before she spoke again. Do you want to see something? She asked. He nodded. She pulled a small envelope from her purse. Inside was a crumpled piece of notebook paper, old and yellowed. She handed it to him. He unfolded it slowly. It was a child's handwriting. Thank you for helping me. I don't remember what happened, but Mom says someone was there, and I think it was you. I hope you are okay. I hope your family knows you were brave. Sophie. Mark's fingers trembled as he read it. His lips parted, but no words came out. Angela watched quietly. She wrote that in her hospital bed. I found it last month when I finally went through her old things. I didn't even know she'd written it. But I think maybe it was for your son. Mark swallowed hard. I didn't know she had a name. Sophie, Angela said. She's 20 now. In college. Studies art. She's still scared of loud sounds. But she paints fireworks like she's trying to reclaim them. Mark folded the letter slowly and pressed it to his chest. Angela stepped closer. I think they saved each other. He nodded. A single tear slipped down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. Outside, the grand finale of the neighborhood fireworks began, loud and colorful and relentless. But inside, neither of them flinched. They just stood there, still, present. The next morning came slowly, like the light had to push its way through the blinds. Mark sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it owed him something. Duke lay nearby, stretched out and snoring softly, one paw twitching. He hadn't slept much. After Angela left, quietly, gently, with a polite thank you and a pat on Duke's head, Mark stood in the middle of the living room for almost an hour, not moving. Her presence still lingered in the air, like a scent, like music just faded out. Now, in the silence of the day after, everything felt louder. He glanced at the photo of Tyler on the counter. The same backward cap, the same spark in his smile. Last night had stirred something. Uncomfortable. Human. Mark poured himself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching the street. Neighbors were out cleaning up. Empty soda cans. Folding chairs. Burned out shells from fireworks. The aftermath of celebration. One girl chased her dog across a lawn, laughing. A man hosed down his driveway. Mark's house, by contrast, looked untouched. Untouched by festivity, by joy, by anything that had to do with moving on. He took a sip of coffee and muttered to himself, "Don't get used to people knocking." Duke let out a low, tired bark. Mark smiled faintly. "You liked her, didn't you?" The dog stretched and rolled onto his side in response. He didn't expect to see her again. Maybe that had been her closure. Say thank you, share a moment, and leave. Clean, efficient. People like that. Mark didn't. But he also didn't know how to stop it. By afternoon, he'd checked the window 5 times. Duke had started sitting by the door without prompting, as if waiting for something or someone. Nothing. No knock. No footsteps. Just stillness. Around 5 o'clock, Mark went outside to bring the empty garbage bin. Duke followed closely, tail low, sniffing at everything like it might hold a memory. And that's when he saw it. On the porch, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, sat a small rectangular object. No note, just a package. He looked around. No car. No Angela. He bent down, picked it up. Duke sniffed it curiously. Inside, carefully wrapped, was a thin, hardcover book. The Sky Inside Us. Mark recognized it immediately. It was a poetry collection. Tyler's favorite, ironically. He had hated poetry until sophomore year, when a teacher had made the class write verses about light. Tyler had come home with a dog-eared copy of that book, reading aloud a line that made no sense to Mark at the time. Some lights don't burn to be seen. They burn to survive. He flipped it open. Inside the cover was a note. Small, handwritten. Your son knew what it meant. Maybe you will, too. He stared at the page. The air felt thinner somehow. He sat on the porch step, the sun casting long shadows across the wooden boards. Duke lay beside him, resting his chin on Mark's foot. Mark opened to a random poem. To the ones who explode before they bloom. I see you. You shine sideways. You crash into the dark, not to destroy, but to be felt. He closed the book gently, letting the silence settle again. Angela had remembered, not just Tyler's name, but something about him. Something few people saw. Or maybe she'd known from the beginning. The sound of gravel crunching made him lift his head. She was walking up the sidewalk, slowly, hair tied back, wearing a gray t-shirt and jeans. No makeup, no smile yet, just presence. He stood unsure. I figured you'd find it, she said, motioning toward the package. I didn't want to bother you. You came back. I wasn't sure if I should, she admitted. But Duke looked disappointed. The dog perked up as if on cue. Mark half laughed, half exhaled. He doesn't hide his feelings. Angela stepped onto the porch. Thought, maybe you want to talk again. Or not. I just couldn't stop thinking about the box. And the project your son had. Mark looked at the book in his hands. You gave me his favorite one. Angela nodded. I remembered you mentioning it. They sat on the porch together. No pressure, just space. I wanted to ask, she said after a while, do you think Tyler knew it would go wrong? Mark looked down. He was smart, but not always careful. I don't think he expected it to blow the way it did. But I think once it started, he understood exactly how bad it was. Angela nodded slowly, and he still ran toward Sophie. Mark's voice came low. It was instinct. It was courage. They watched the sun dip lower behind the trees. Angela sipped from a bottle of water she'd brought with her. Mark finally asked, Is she okay now? Your daughter? Angela tilted her head, thinking, She's okay most days. She paints a lot. She's in therapy. She avoids holidays, but she loves music. She doesn't remember everything, but she remembers feeling someone pull her out of the way. She said it felt like being yanked back to the world. Mark stared straight ahead. I'm glad she lived. Angela didn't respond right away. Then she said, You know, the fireworks are all gone, but I still smell smoke sometimes. Mark nodded. It stays with you. They sat in quiet agreement. Then Angela pulled something else from her bag, a worn, Folded photo. This was Sophie the week before. Mark looked. She was smiling, holding a sparkler, wearing a red hoodie, a Band-Aid on her chin. He handed it back. "Thank you," he said. And he meant it. She smiled softly. "Want to walk, Duke?" He hesitated, then nodded. They walked the block together, slowly. No rush. Duke trotted ahead, sniffing fences and chasing a leaf. When they returned, the street was darker. The porch light had flickered on. Angela stopped at the bottom step. "I should go." Mark looked at her, unsure. "But you'll come back?" he asked. She gave a small smile. "Only if Duke wants me to." Mark looked down at the dog. Duke barked once, low and certain. Angela laughed. Mark watched her walk away, the book still in his hand, the note tucked inside his shirt pocket. He didn't say anything more, but inside, he felt the kindling of something unfamiliar. Not hope, not yet, but possibility. The sky was overcast the next morning. Clouds stretched thin like gauze, the sun hiding behind them as if it too needed a break from the brightness. Mark stood in the garage, the heavy door half open to let in light. A fine layer of dust floated in the air, stirred by the shifting breeze and Duke's curious pause. The dog sniffed everything. Old tools, deflated basketballs, cans of paint long dried out. Angela stood beside Mark, sleeves rolled up, holding a box labeled Tyler, Keep. She looked at him. "Are you sure you're ready?" Mark didn't answer right away. He was holding a pair of pliers in one hand, and a sketch Tyler had made of some bizarre contraption involving pulleys and fireworks in the other. "I'm not sure what ready feels like anymore," he said finally. Angela set the box down on the old workbench. "That's fair." Together, they started unpacking. Inside were bits of Tyler's world, each object sticky with memory. A broken drone wing, 3 notebooks, an old pocket knife with initials carved badly into the side, several loose wires, a pair of char goggles. Angela picked up one of the notebooks. The cover was duct-taped. "May I?" she asked. Mark nodded. She flipped through pages of chaotic sketches, chemical notes, diagrams of launch sequences. "This is detailed," she said, genuinely impressed. He really knew his stuff. Mark leaned over her shoulder. He wanted to build his own synchronized show. Light and music. Even got a speaker rigged to respond to detonations. I told him it was dangerous, that he didn't have enough training. Did he listen? Mark gave a wry smile. He listened, then did it anyway. Angela chuckled softly. He was a teenager. Sounds like he was passionate. "That's a nice word for reckless," Mark said. But there was no bitterness in his tone, only tired affection. They kept sorting. At one point, Angela held up a small glass jar filled with colored powder. "What's this?" Mark took it from her and examined it. He made his own spark compounds, mixed them in secret. I banned him from working with potassium nitrate after he nearly blew up the mailbox. Angela raised an eyebrow. "He sounds like someone who was trying to prove he could do something big." Mark grew quiet. He always felt small, like he had to earn his place in the room. Angela didn't say anything, just waited. "He was bullied," Mark added, "before he switched schools. Used to come home with bruises he blamed on gym class. I found a notebook once, full of things he wished he could say to them." Angela looked at him carefully. "I think that's why he got obsessed with fireworks. Power, brightness, being seen." Angela closed the notebook gently and set it down. There was a moment of stillness between them. Then Mark exhaled. "I found something once," he said, "after he died." Angela looked at him. "I never told anyone, not even my sister." He crossed the garage, opened a locked drawer beneath the bench, and pulled out a slim envelope. The paper was yellowed, edges curling. He handed it to Angela. She opened it carefully. Inside was a letter written by Tyler. "If something happens, it's my fault. I pushed too hard, wanted too much. But I swear, I just wanted people to look up and see something beautiful. I never meant to hurt anyone." Angela read it twice, then a third time. "I think he knew," Mark said. "Not that it would go wrong, but that he was playing with something bigger than him. He was scared, but he did it anyway." Angela folded the letter, hands trembling slightly. "That letter is not a confession. It's a plea." Mark sat on the edge of an overturned bucket, elbows on his knees. I wanted him to be extraordinary, but I forgot to let him be 17. Angela kneeled beside him. "You loved him." He nodded. "I was so angry when I found this letter. Angry he didn't stop. Angry he didn't ask for help. But mostly angry he wasn't here to tell me himself." Angela reached into her bag and pulled out something small. It was a firework lighter. Old, scorched at the tip, initials burned into metal, TS. "I found this behind my shed a few months ago. I didn't know what it was. Thought it was trash. Then Sophie recognized it. Said the boy who saved her dropped it when he pulled her away." Mark stared. Angela placed it in his hand. "I think it belongs here," she said softly. Mark closed his fingers around it. Duke wandered over and rested his head on Mark's knee. "I don't know what to do with all this," Mark said. "This anger, this guilt, this silence." Angela looked around at the scattered fragments of Tyler's life. Maybe the silence isn't empty. Maybe it's waiting. He looked at her, confused. "For what?" She shrugged. "For you to speak back." Mark laughed once, sharp and quick, like it surprised even him. Angela smiled. "See? That was a sound." He nodded, looking at the lighter again. "I used to think if I opened this stuff, it would make the grief worse. But now I'm starting to wonder if keeping it locked up didn't make it louder." They stood together and looked over the boxes. "I want to do something with it," Mark said. "Not throw it out, but not just archive it either." He wanted to build something that mattered. Angela tilted her head. "Maybe you still can." Mark raised an eyebrow. "You said you're not good with ceremonies. So don't make one. Just build something. With music. With lights. With heart." He looked at her, then at the sky beyond the open garage. "Next 4th of July," he said slowly. "Something small, but his." Angela nodded. "Sounds like a plan." As they packed the boxes neatly, Mark glanced over at her. "You always show up with something." She smiled. "Old habit. I used to be a paramedic. Showing up was a job." He blinked. "You were there that night?" Angela hesitated. "No, but I got the call. I was on shift. I handled the cleanup after." He studied her expression. "You knew this whole time?" She shook her head. "Only bits. But last night, it all came together." Mark looked down. "You should have said something." Angela said, "You weren't ready, and neither was I." They closed the final box together. Mark leaned back, wiping dust from his hands. "You want to stay for dinner?" Angela grinned. "Only if Duke approves." The dog thumped his tail twice. "That's a yes," Mark said. And for the first time in a long time, the idea of someone staying didn't feel like an invasion. It felt possible. Mark wasn't sure when it became routine. Angela started showing up every couple of days, sometimes with muffins, sometimes with nothing at all. Sometimes she stayed for dinner. Sometimes just a few minutes of conversation on the porch while Duke lay at their feet. They didn't talk about heavy things all the time. They talked about little things, too. Music, books, weird neighborhood decorations. Once, they argued for a solid 10 minutes about whether sweet pickles should exist. She laughed more now, and so did he. But Mark was always waiting for it to end. Not because he wanted it to, but because he didn't trust it. And that thought followed him like a shadow. One Thursday morning, the knock on the door wasn't Angela's. It was harder, faster, familiar. Duke barked once before wagging his tail. Mark opened the door to see his sister, Karen. She was holding a casserole and wearing a look halfway between relief and frustration. "About time," she said. "I've been texting you for 3 days." Mark stepped aside, wordless. Karen entered like someone who used to live there. She placed the dish on the kitchen counter and turned to him. "Don't look so surprised. I had a feeling something was different. You didn't ignore my last text completely." He rubbed his face. "That was an accident. Still progress." She glanced around. "You've cleaned up, or someone has." Mark stayed silent. Karen walked to the photo of Tyler on the counter and picked it up carefully. "I miss him every day," she said. Mark's shoulders tensed. Karen turned toward him. "You think you're the only one who grieves?" Mark bristled. "I never said that." "No, but you've acted like it. For 5 years. That's not fair." "It's absolutely fair," she snapped. "You shut everyone out. You punish yourself. And you pushed away everyone who tried to stand with you." Mark sat down heavily at the table. Karen sighed, her voice softening. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here because something's changed. I can feel it. And I needed to see it." Mark looked at her. He hadn't realized how much her face had aged. Or maybe how much his had. "There's someone," he admitted. Karen raised an eyebrow. He hesitated. "Angela. She's connected to that night." Karen went still. "She's the mother of the girl Tyler tried to save." Karen blinked. "And she's here." Mark nodded. Karen pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "Tell me everything." He did, slowly, from the first knock, to the casserole, to the letter from Sophie, to the nights they spent talking. He told her about Tyler's hidden projects, the lighter, the poetry book, the letter he left behind. Karen listened, her fingers interlaced tightly. When he was done, she said, "Do you think you're letting him go?" Mark thought for a moment. "I think I'm finally letting him stay the right way." Karen nodded slowly. "You know Mom always said fireworks were beautiful because they didn't last." Mark smiled faintly. "Yeah, Tyler hated that idea. Said beauty shouldn't have to be brief." Karen reached across the table and put her hand over his. "Do you think she blames him, Angela?" Mark shook his head. "No, that's the hardest part. She thanks him, and I don't know what to do with that." "You accept it," Karen said, "and maybe you thank her back." There was a pause. Then Karen asked, "Have you told her everything?" Mark looked away. "Not yet." "About what?" Mark stood, walked to the window. "That I found the fireworks first." Karen's breath caught. "I found them under his bed, a whole week before the accident. I confronted him, told him to get rid of them. He swore he would, swore it was just for fun. I let it go. I let it slide. Thought I was being the cool dad." Karen stood too. "Mark, you couldn't have known. I could have checked again. I could have followed up. I could have stopped it." Karen crossed him. "And then maybe you would have snuck out with them anyway, or gotten them somewhere else. You don't know. You can't know." He didn't respond. Karen pressed. "And telling Angela? What would that do?" "She deserves to know." "Maybe, but only if you're telling her to bring her closer, not to push her away." Mark leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Karen stepped back. "Look, I didn't come here to tell you what to do. I came to see my brother, and maybe meet the woman who helped bring him back." Mark smiled weakly. "She'll be back tonight." Karen grabbed her purse. "Then I'll come by tomorrow. You two have your evening." She kissed his cheek and left. That night, as promised, Angela returned. No food this time, just herself and a quiet smile. Mark opened the door. "You look like you've been thinking too hard," she said. "Family tend to do that." Angela chuckled. They sat on the porch. Duke curled at their feet, the air still warm with the tail end of summer. Mark turned to her. "I want to tell you something." Angela tilted her head. He paused. "I found the fireworks. Before the accident." Her face changed slightly, but not with shock. With understanding. "You knew?" "I thought he got rid of them. I believed him. And I never checked." Angela didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said, "I found the lighter months before I gave it to you. I didn't know what it was. I kept it anyway." He looked at her. "We're both carrying pieces of a puzzle," she said. "But we don't have to keep punishing ourselves for the missing ones." He let out a slow breath. "You're not angry?" "I was," she said, "at first. But then I realized grief and guilt can look like the same thing. But only one of them leads somewhere." Mark nodded. They sat in silence again. After a few minutes, Angela asked, "Do you want to come with me next week?" "Where?" "To the place. Where it happened." Mark hesitated. "I think it might help. For both of us." He looked at her. I'll go, he said. She smiled, and they sat there as the wind picked up slightly, carried with it the soft rustle of old leaves and older memories. The grass was taller than Mark remembered. What used to be an open field, clean, trimmed, structured for holiday shows, was now wild, taken back by time and silence. The picnic benches were rotting, overtaken by vines. The bleachers were gone, replaced by tufts of weeds and the faint outline of forgotten footpaths. Only the memory of what had happened remained intact. Angela parked the car just outside the wire fence, the same one that had once held a "No fireworks beyond this point" sign. The sign was gone now, long since stolen or knocked down. Duke hopped out first, nose to the ground. Mark followed. His boots made soft crunches in the dry earth as he took slow, careful steps toward the spot he could never fully erase from his mind. Angela said nothing. She just walked beside him, their shoulders close, like she knew the gravity of his visit didn't need commentary. They reached the middle of the field. The trees in the distance rustled with the breeze, as if whispering old secrets. Mark stopped. "This is it," he said. "Right here. This is where it started." Angela nodded. Sophie was up on the bleachers. I remember seeing the photos later. She said she thought she had the best seat in the house. Mark stared ahead. She did, until it became the worst. He crouched slowly, touching the earth. It was different now. No burn marks, no blackened patches like the photos showed after the explosion, but somehow it still felt scorched. Angela took a few steps away, toward a tree line that had overgrown the edge of the field. "There used to be a light here," she said, "from the parking lot. It cast this weird blue halo across the grass." Sophie said it looked like the moon was upside down. Mark didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on something small in the grass. He leaned closer. It was a piece of metal, rusted, curled at the edge, with faint scratches. He picked it up. It was part of a launch tube. Homemade, bent, burned. He turned it over in his hand and whispered, "Tyler." Angela came beside him, watching as he brushed away more grass to reveal a thin wooden base, partially buried. He built his own platform, Mark said. He didn't want to use store-bought fireworks. Said it wasn't real unless he made it himself. Angela crouched. "It's still here, after all this time." Mark nodded, almost dazed, because it wasn't part of the cleanup. This was deeper. Duke sat beside them, alert but calm. Angela reached into her bag and pulled something out. "I brought this." It was a folded letter, aged, corners worn, lines pressed deep into the paper. Mark's face tightened. "Where did you get that?" "You gave it to me the other day. I read it again last night." She held it gently. "It stayed with me." Mark sat down in the grass, legs crossed like he used to do when Tyler was a kid and they went camping. "I have another one," he said, "from before it happened." Angela looked surprised. "You never mentioned that." Mark pulled a small envelope from his coat. "I found it behind his dresser. A few days before. I found it after, but I think he wrote it the week of, maybe when he was planning everything." Angela unfolded it slowly, carefully. The ink was smudged in one place, but the handwriting was unmistakably young and pressed with emotion. "I don't know if you'll ever read this. I've been working on this fireworks show for weeks, and honestly, I'm scared. I want it to be good. I want people to look up and remember something beautiful. But maybe I'm getting over my head. If something goes wrong, I swear I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted to matter. I just wanted to be seen. Tyler." Angela read it twice before looking at Mark. "That's not a suicide note," she said. "It's a letter from a kid who felt small." Mark's voice cracked. He always did, even when he smiled. He never believed he was enough. "And he paused, swallowing hard. "I always push him to do more, be better. I thought I was encouraging him, but maybe I was just making the silence louder." Angela looked out across the field. We never know how loud our voices sound when they echo inside someone else. Mark clenched the letter. I was supposed to protect him, not give him more weight to carry. Angela knelt beside him. "He didn't blame you, not once in either of those letters." Mark whispered, "But I blame me." Angela placed her hand over his. Then maybe it's time to forgive him for not being perfect, and forgive yourself for expecting him to be. Mark looked at her, eyes full of unshed tears. And Sophie, what does she know about all this? Angela looked at the sky. Some, not everything. She doesn't like to talk about that night, but she paints fireworks in her studio. Every year. I think it's her way of reclaiming it. They sat in silence. Duke laid down with a soft grunt, as if even he understood the importance of stillness here. Mark spoke again. You know what I remember most from that night? Angela turned her head. The silence after the explosion. Not the noise itself, but the quiet that followed. It felt endless. Angela said, I remember the sirens. Then nothing, like the world stopped breathing. Mark nodded. I think we've both been holding our breath since. They sat there a long time, watching the sun peek through the gray. Then Angela stood. I want to show you something. She led him to the edge of the field where a broken fence post leaned sideways. She crouched and pointed. There, etched into the wood was something sharp, with initials TS+. Angela smiled softly. Maybe he left a message. Or maybe it was unfinished, like he knew someone else would come later. Mark reached out and touched the carving. Then maybe it's time to finish it. He pulled a key from his pocket. Carefully, he etched the missing piece. TS+S. Angela blinked back tears. Mark looked at her. Thank you for bringing me here. Angela nodded. Thank you for staying. As they turned to leave, Duke bounded ahead, tail high. The field behind them remained quiet, but the silence no longer felt like grief. It felt like grace. Mark had never liked glue guns. Too messy, too hot, too much commitment. But that Saturday morning, with the sun barely above the trees and Duke lounging in the grass, he stood in the middle of his garage holding a half-melted stick of adhesive, squinting over a piece that was painted in deep navy blue. Angela sat nearby, legs crossed on an old blanket, surrounded by scattered pieces of Tyler's old gear. What do you think? She asked, holding up a curved metal arch covered in small LED lights. Mark tilted his head. Looks like a satellite dish crashed into a disco ball. Angela laughed. Perfect. He would have loved that. They were building it together. A tribute piece. Not quite a memorial, not quite a sculpture. Tyler's old blueprints were the inspiration, but the execution was theirs. They decided on music, too. Angela had pulled a short audio track Sophie had composed, a slow, haunting piano melody that built into light percussion. They would sync the lights to it. Not fireworks, not danger, just rhythm and memory. It was imperfect, crooked, made from broken things. And maybe that was the point. Mark wiped sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. I haven't used this many tools since I built Tyler a treehouse that leaned like the Tower of Pisa. Angela smiled. Did he like it anyway? He said it was the best one on the block. Probably because it was the only one. They kept working for hours, soldering, sanding, wiring, painting. They spoke in half sentences and in side jokes. Angela hummed softly to herself as she adjusted the LED strip. Duke supervised with the air of someone deeply invested in project management. Mark was halfway through mounting the final panel when a car pulled into the driveway. It was old, loud, familiar. Angela glanced up, expecting someone. No. The car door opened. A young man stepped out, tall, thin, with a faded hoodie and a nervous expression. Mark's heart skipped. It was Kyle, Tyler's best friend from school, the one who stopped coming around after the funeral. He hadn't seen him in 5 years. Mark stood, cautious. Kyle. The young man nodded. Hey, Mr. Sullivan. I wasn't sure you'd remember me. I remember. Angela stood beside Mark. Kyle looked at the garage, at the half-finished structure. Is that Tyler's? Mark nodded slowly. Kyle stepped closer, hands in his pockets. I heard you were doing something with his stuff. I saw a post. Sophie shared it. Angela blinked. Sophie. Yeah, Kyle said. We talk sometimes. Not much, but she told me what you were doing. Said it helped. Mark studied him. Why are you here, Kyle? Kyle took a deep breath. Because I never said anything. And I think maybe I should have. Angela and Mark exchanged a glance. Kyle continued, his voice lower. That night, I was there. I helped him set up the launch rig, the fuses, everything. Mark's stomach dropped. I told him it was a bad idea, Kyle said quickly. He knew it was risky, but he thought he had it under control. He said he double-checked everything, that he tested the ignition, that he reinforced the base. Angela stepped forward, but it failed. Kyle nodded. I left before the launch. I didn't stay. I told him I couldn't watch. I was scared, so I bailed. Mark's hands curled into fists. And you never told anyone this? Kyle's face crumpled. I couldn't. I was afraid people would blame me, that they'd say I was part of it. And I helped him build it. I handed him the wires. The garage went quiet. Even Duke stood still. Mark stepped back. Why now? Kyle's voice shook. Because I see what you're doing. You're honoring him. And he deserves that. But you also deserve the truth. Angela asked gently, Why did he do it, Kyle? Really? Kyle's eyes filled. He wanted people to look up. That's all. He thought if they looked up, maybe they'd stop seeing him as a screw-up. Maybe they'd just see the lights. Mark sat down heavily on a crate. Kyle took a slow step forward and placed something on the table. A flash drive. I filmed the whole setup. He wanted to review the launch angles. It's all there, the way he wired it, the fuse timing, even the part where he talks about you. Mark looked up slowly. What? He recorded himself, like a video diary. He said you were going to be proud, even if you never said it. Mark reached out and took the flash drive with trembling fingers. Kyle stepped back. I'm sorry I was silent for so long, he said, but I couldn't keep it anymore. Mark nodded once. Thank you, he said. Kyle gave a short, emotional nod and walked back to his car. Angela sat beside Mark in the garage. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, I thought I knew everything, but I didn't. Angela replied, Grief makes you build walls, and sometimes truth can't climb them until you let a door appear. Mark turned the flash drive over in his hand. Do I watch it? Angela placed her hand gently on his. When you're ready. They worked in silence after that, finishing the sculpture, adjusting the lights, mounting the final base. And when the sun began to set, they tested it. Angela hit play on the track. The lights pulsed, slow and synchronized. Soft colors danced across the wood. Amber, blue, violet. Mark watched with his arms folded, the flash drive still in his pocket. It's messy, he said. Angela smiled. So was he. They stood in the driveway, side by side, as the lights flickered against the dusk. Not fireworks, not explosions, just a quiet rhythm. A heartbeat turned into light. Duke barked once, tail wagging, and Mark whispered. He was trying to tell us something. Even back then. Angela looked up at him. Mark exhaled. I think I'm ready to listen. Mark didn't watch the video that night. He sat with a flash drive in his pocket, feeling his weight shift every time he moved, as if Tyler himself was nudging him from somewhere deep in memory, saying, Come on, Dad. Just look. Angela didn't push. She stayed for dinner, helped clean the brushes they'd used to paint the final panels of the tribute, and scratched behind Duke's ears until he fell asleep on her lap. When she left, she kissed Mark on the cheek, the kind of kiss that didn't demand anything. It just said, I'm here, and that was enough. But when the house fell quiet again, when the dishes were put away and the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound left, Mark found himself in front of the old laptop in the garage. The same one Tyler had once used to research fuse delays and ignition angles, downloading PDFs with titles like Pyrotechnics and the Human Eye. He plugged in the drive. There were 3 files. One was labeled setup_test_3.mov. The second, camera angle_B. And the third, for Dad. Mark's hand hovered over the mouse. His breath slowed. His chest tightened. He clicked. The video opened with static, then adjusted to focus on Tyler's face. He was sitting on the floor of the garage, back against a cabinet, legs crossed, Hair messy, hoodie sleeves pulled down over his hands like he used to wear when he was anxious. The date in the corner said June 28th, 6 days before the accident. Tyler looked into the camera, then away, then back again. Okay, so, if you're watching this, it's probably because something went wrong. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe this is just a record. I don't know. I don't really know what I'm doing, honestly. He smiled nervously. I know you said not to mess with this stuff. I know, but I kept thinking, what if I could make something that didn't suck? What if I could make something people remembered? Just once? I wanted it to be more than a loud boom. I wanted it to have rhythm, like music in the sky. He scratched the back of his neck, looking suddenly smaller on the screen. Sometimes I feel like I take up too much space, and other times, like I'm not even there. But when I build, when I create, I feel like I exist, even if just for a second. Mark's eyes blurred. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I know I mess up. A lot. I know I get excited and forget to slow down. But this show I did slow down. I tried. And if it doesn't work, I'm sorry. I really am. But I just want to make you proud. Even if you never said it out loud. He looked at the lens one more time. I love you, Dad. Even when you're quiet. Even when you're far away. And if I did screw this up, I hope you can still remember me for the part one got right. Please don't hate me. The screen faded to black. Mark sat frozen, his face wet, the room spinning in slow motion. For the first time in 5 years, the sound of Tyler's voice had returned, not as a memory, but as something real, something living, not trapped in photographs or old voicemails. This wasn't an echo. It was him. Mark reached out and touched the laptop screen gently. I never hated you, he whispered. Not for a second. Duke rested his chin on Mark's foot, silent as always. The next morning, a knock came at the door. Not Angela's. It was lighter. Hesitant, Mark opened it slowly. A young woman stood on the porch, mid-20s, soft red curls pulled into a messy bun, paint stains on her jacket. Her hands trembled slightly. Sophie, Mark asked. She nodded. I hope it's okay I came. Angela gave me the address. I didn't want to wait. Mark stepped aside. Of course. They sat at the kitchen table. Sophie looked around nervously, her eyes drifting to the photo of Tyler on the counter. She smiled faintly. He looks exactly like I remember. That cap, that ridiculous smirk. Mark chuckled softly. He thought it made him look cool. Sophie took a deep breath. I've tried to write this letter 100 times, but nothing ever felt right. And then Angela told me what you're doing, the project, the lights, the music, and I realized I needed to say it in person. Mark waited. Sophie met his eyes. I know what people said, that he caused the explosion, that he was reckless, and maybe he was, but he also saved me. I remember that. Mark swallowed hard. He pulled me down from the bleachers, she continued, screamed for everyone to run, covered me when the sparks flew. I don't remember the sound, just the heat. And then, quiet. And him, on top of me, not moving. She paused. My mom said you blamed yourself, that maybe you thought you raised him wrong. But if you did, then you also raised the kind of person who gave his life for a stranger. Mark's throat burned. Sophie reached into her bag and pulled out a canvas. Small, delicate, still wet. I painted this yesterday, she said. It's the last one in the series I started the year after. I call it What He Left Behind. Mark looked. The painting showed a dark field under a pale sky, with faint silhouettes of people in the distance. And in the center, not fireworks, not explosions, but a single burst of soft golden light, shaped like an open hand. It was beautiful, quiet, heartbreaking. Mark whispered he would have loved this. Sophie smiled. I hope so. They sat in silence. Then Mark said, We're showing the project tomorrow night. You should come. Sophie hesitated. I haven't gone to a 4th of July event since. I know, Mark said, but this isn't fireworks. It's something else. Sophie nodded slowly. I like that. They stood. At the door, She turned back. Thank you for keeping him alive in this way. Mark looked at her. Thank you for reminding me how. She left with the painting in his hands. That evening, Mark placed it next to Tyler's photo. And for the first time since everything changed, he didn't feel like he was holding on to the past. He felt like he was carrying it forward. July 4th, for the first time in 5 years, Mark didn't dread the date. He didn't love it. Not yet, but he didn't fear it either. The field behind the community center had been cleaned up over the past week. Angela had contacted the town council, who surprisingly offered their support. A few volunteers helped pull weeds, cut grass, and clear debris. Someone even replaced the old no fireworks sign with a new one that read, Quiet Light Memorial, July 4th at dusk. It wasn't a big crowd, maybe 30 people, some parents with folding chairs, a few teenagers, a couple from the fire department, Mark's sister, Angela's co-workers, and Sophie. Sophie had brought a stack of prints from her painting series and placed them gently on a wooden bench beside the tribute. People walked by, quietly, respectfully, pausing to take in the colors. There were no prices, no labels, just her name in the corner of each one, and a single note beside them. He saved me. Mark stood behind the sculpture. It looked nothing like a fireworks stand now. It looked like something between a starburst and an old radio tower, lined with LED filaments and strips of recycled copper. At its center was the core Tyler had built, fused with newer wiring and lit from within. Angela stood beside him, holding a small remote. You ready? She asked. Mark nodded. She pressed play. The first notes of Sophie's piano piece drifted out of the speakers, quiet, uncertain, like fingers learning their way. As the music grew, the lights followed, not flashing, not strobing, breathing, pulsing like a heartbeat. Soft gold, gentle blue, deep purple. It was hypnotic. No one spoke. The field, so full of noise years ago, was now a canvas of silence and light. Halfway through the song, the sculpture bloomed. The inner core split into 6 points of light, each one rotating slowly, casting beams against the grass. A ripple of warm light rolled over the audience like a wave. Some people cried. Others just closed their eyes. Mark stood still, watching. Then a hand slid into his. Angela, her fingers warm, steady. At the end of the song, the lights dimmed and returned to their first state, a single, steady glow. No one clapped, but that wasn't the point. The lights faded completely, and the crowd stayed in place for a moment longer before slowly beginning to disperse. Sophie approached Mark, eyes shining. It was perfect. He smiled. He'd be furious it wasn't louder. She laughed. He always wanted explosions. Angela joined them, and the three stood together, forming a small triangle in the field where Tyler once stood alone. Karen came over with Duke on a leash. The dog had become the unofficial mascot of the event, wearing a little blue scarf Angela had tied that morning. He behaved, Karen said. Didn't even bark once. Mark knelt and gave Duke a scratch. He's growing up. Finally. As the last of the attendees trickled away, Mark noticed something surprising. Kyle. He'd come back. Standing near the edge of the field, unsure, Mark walked over. Thanks for coming, he said. Kyle nodded. I wasn't sure if I should, but I think he'd want me here. Mark looked at the younger man. He would. He looked up to you more than you knew. Kyle's eyes welled. I never told him I was proud. You're not the only one. They shook hands, not tight, but firm. Real. As night fully settled, the group gathered their things. Angela looked at Mark. Are you okay? He thought about it. No, he said, but I'm not stuck anymore. They walked toward the car together. Duke padded behind them, panting lightly. Halfway down the path, Angela stopped. What if we do it again next year? Mark raised an eyebrow. The lights. She shook her head. All of it. The field, the gathering, the stories. Not to remember how he died, but to remember how he lived. Mark turned back, looking at the field one last time. It wasn't dark anymore. I'd like that. Angela smiled. We could call it Tyler's light. He nodded. Yeah, That sounds right. Back at the house, the air was cooler. Mark lit a candle on the porch, a tradition he'd avoided until now. He placed it beside Sophie's painting, next to the old photo of Tyler, and a recovered metal shard from the field. Angela sat beside him, 2 mugs of cocoa in her hands. She handed one to Mark. "No marshmallows this time," she said. "I forgot." Mark smiled. "Doesn't matter." They sat together, quietly, watching the flame flicker. Mark looked over at her. "I used to think I had to protect myself from pain, from connection, from everything." Angela said nothing, just listened. "But maybe that's not how you protect yourself," he continued. "Maybe you protect yourself by letting the pain have a shape, a name, a purpose." Angela nodded. "You don't heal by closing. You heal by opening." Duke laid his head on Angela's foot, content. And Mark, for the first time in years, didn't feel like a father who failed. He felt like a man who remembered, a man who could finally look up and not just see the sky, but the light still glowing there, not from fireworks, but from what they'd built, together,